Hello, Pamoja class. This is Voicing Your Elasticity, done by Christopher Marshall, Megan French, Liam Murphy, and Lee Na Chen. According to the textbook, price elasticity of demand is a measure of how much the demand for a product changes when there is a change in the price of the product. And it is modeled by this equation. Price elasticity of demand equals the percent change in the quantity demanded over the percent change in price. To gain a better understanding of this concept, let's consider the price elasticity demand for two products. Here we see cigarettes and meat. Let's examine the price elasticity demand for both. Cigarettes are relatively price inelastic, meaning that as the price changes, there will be little change in the demand for the product. This concept is displayed in the diagram to the left side of the slide. You might wonder why cigarettes are priced inelastic in the first place. This can be explained by one of the determinants of PED, the necessity of the product. Cigarettes are viewed as a necessity by heavy users. Therefore, these users will continue to buy this product, even as the price rises dramatically because they can't stop their consumption. Beef is relatively price inelastic, meaning that as the price changes, there will be great change in the demand for the product. This concept is displayed in the diagram of the right side of the slide. Why is beef price inelastic in the first place? Because of the number and closeness of substitutes. Beef can be substituted by many other very similar products, such as chicken. As such, if the price of the substitute decreases, the demand for beefs would also decrease because the demand for the substitute would increase. The consumer would replace the substitute in the place of beef. According to the textbook, income elasticity of demand is a measure of how much the demand for a product changes when there is a change in the customer's income. YED is modeled by this equation. The percent change in quantity demanded over the percent change in the customer's income. YED is separated into two groups, inferior goods and normal goods. Normal goods include food and cars. Whereas the income increases, the quantity demanded for these two products would increase as well. The difference between these products is directly associated with their elasticities. Food, a necessity, is income inelastic, and the car, a luxury/superior good, is income elastic. As income rises, the customer is able to spend more and buy more products. Typically, this means that the customer upgrades their consumption to more expensive luxury products such as cars, but not unnecessary products like food because there's no need to increase its quality of consumption. Inferior goods, such as non-branded clothing, are the very opposite of normal goods. As the income rises, the quantity demanded of these products fall as the consumer upgrades these inferior goods to superior goods. So for this example, non-branded clothing to more expensive branded clothing. According to the textbook, cross-elasticity of demand is a measure of how much the demand for a product changes when there is a change in the price of another product. XED is modeled by this equation. The percent change in quantity demanded of the product over the percent change in a price of another product. XED can be separated into two groups, substitute goods and complement goods. For substitute goods, as the price of one product rises, the quantity demanded of the other rises as well, giving a positive value for XED. This is because consumers will substitute the more expensive product with another similar and less expensive product. The actual elasticity values depend on how close the substitutes are. For example, beef and chicken versus beef and tuna. Which would have the higher XED value? The answer is beef and chicken. They are more closely suitable and therefore will be more cross-elastic. For complements, as the price of one product increases, the quantity demanded of the other decreases, giving a negative value for XED. This is because the products are bought together, and if the demand for one product falls, the demand for the other would naturally fall as well. The elasticity values, like for substitute goods, depends on how closely related the products are. The closer related they are to each other, the more cross-elastic the products will be. In the two examples given, the printer and printer ink would have a greater cross-elasticity value than the bread and patty because one cannot be bought without the other, whereas for the bread and patty, bread can be bought without the patty. So the three big PED determinants are the number and closeness of substitutes, the necessity of the product and how widely the product is defined, and the time period considered. All these things affect the PED and their impact on the coefficient of elasticity. So now let's look at the different types of goods, and specifically in this slide, the types of goods affected by the cross-elasticity of demand, which is the percent change in quantity demanded of a good over the percent change in the price of another good. So first we see complements, and we can call two goods complements if their XCD value is negative, as one good's change in price affects the demand of another good's change in demand, whether positive or negative. Substitutes, we can see that if two goods can be labeled substitutes if their XCD value is positive, so this means that consumers can use the goods in place of one another. So now continuing with the different types of goods, let's look at some types of goods that are affected by the income elasticity demand, which the equation for that is the percent change in quantity demanded of the product over the percent change in the income of customers. So here we see four different types of goods: normal goods, inferior goods, necessity goods, and superior goods. So for normal goods, the value of YED is positive, and this means that as demand increases, the income also increases. For inferior goods, they have negative YED values as demand decreases as income increases. Necessity goods are products that have very, very low YEDs. The demand will change very little if income increases. Necessity goods, such as milk, everybody needs it. Doesn't matter how much money you make, everybody's going to end up buying it. And last, you can see superior goods, which are products that have high YEDs, which means if income changes, the demand for these goods changes drastically. These are more of your wants. So if you have a lot of extra money, you can afford to buy these things. As compared to if you don't have a lot of extra money, you can't necessarily afford to buy these things. So now let's move into examining the role of elasticities in the decision-making processes of firms. So first we can see the price elasticity of demand. This is how firms can maximize profits. To make more money, theoretically, you have to charge more money. But that comes with the downside of decreasing demand. As price rises, demand decreases. The goal here is to find the inelastic demand where the price rises just enough that demand doesn't decrease all that much, and it will increase overall revenue, which maximizes the profits. So next we see the cross-elasticity of demand, which represents how one firm competes with another. This is how firms can ensure that they are staying competitive with their competitors and how they can change their price based on how their competitors are doing and play with the market in that sense. And last, we see the income elasticity of demand. And this shows how income affects the consumer's decision to buy or to not buy a product. So firms must determine whether goods are necessities, inferior, superior, normal, to determine, their target market. Necessity good can be sold to everyone, like milk. Everybody needs it, no matter how much money you make. But for superior goods, which are more of those wants, only people with excess income can typically afford to buy these items. So firms can use geographical income data to determine where the best place to sell their products would be, whether they be necessities or even superior goods. So now let's move on to examining the role of different elasticities in the decisions made by the government. So first we see taxes, which are fees imposed on goods by the government to make government tax revenue. And these taxes add to the price that the good will be sold to the consumers for. So as we can see, if the demand is inelastic, a higher tax will cause only a small fall in demand. When the demand is inelastic, governments will see a significant increase in their tax revenue. So next, let's move on to subsidies, which are money that the government gives to producers to help them make their products and be able to sell them at a lower price. So again, subsidies have the opposite effect of a tax. They actually lower the price that the good will be sold to the consumer for. And last, we see price control. The free market doesn't always lead to the best outcomes for all producers and customers or for society. So government intervention is seen as necessary. So the main two ways the government intervenes are through maximum prices and minimum prices. So lastly, let's take a look at why the price elasticity of demand is relatively low for many primary commodities and why the price elasticity demand for manufactured goods is relatively high. So if we look at the PED values for primary commodities and manufactured goods, we can see straight away that generally primary commodities have relatively low PED values, which makes them inelastic, while manufactured goods tend to be more elastic. So why is this? So let's look at the determinants of the PED value, and we can start to identify why this might be the case. So let's take a look at the bullet points. The availability of close substitutes in the market. The more substitutes available, the greater the elasticity. Is the good a luxury or a necessity? Luxuries are more elastic in demand than necessities. Proportion of income spent on them. Cheap items tend to have an inelastic demand. Are they addictive? These obviously become price inelastic. And lastly, the time period. Elasticity tends to increase with time. Lastly, I'd like to thank everybody for watching our presentation and listening to our recording of Voicing Your Elasticity. And again, this was a project done by Christopher Marshall, Megan French, Liam Murphy, and Lena Chen. Have a good day, everybody.